So the camera cut off right as I went to read the text. I mean, it happens, right? Section 1403, Annual Reports on Transactions in which Federal Financial Assistance provided. A. In general, the Secretary of the Treasury or his delegate shall submit annual reports to the Committee on Ways and Means of the House of Representatives and the Committee on Finance of the Senate on 1A. The transactions which occur during the year for which the report is made and with respect to which federal financial assistance is provided. B. The aggregate amount of federal financial assistance provided with respect to such transactions. And C. Any tax benefits available by reason of such transactions. And 2. The aggregate amount of federal financial assistance provided during such year and the aggregate tax benefits utilized during such year, which are attributable to such transactions in prior years. B. Definition. For purposes of this section, the term federal financial assistance means any assistance to which Section 597 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 applies. That's Section 1403 of the Financial Institutions Reform, Recovery, and Enforcement Act of 1989, as reflected in the engrossed in the House version on congress.gov right now, but not reflected in the final version. Now, I did a little bit of tracking down of this, trying to figure this out. When I first found this information, I think late March or early April. This specific bill. I did some specific research on Representative Gonzalez as well as this bill. And there was a cross-reference with the fact that two current members of Congress had put out a request for a report under Title 11 of this connected to housing. And my concerns were actually about things that weren't just connected to the housing. As a matter of fact, in connection with trying to identify that, I found an old report from a group of appraisers that is actually at the core of what I'm trying to get to right now concerning appraisals and the appropriate means by which housing and real property is appraised, as well as also things connected to fees and the potential uses of fees. But before we get there, it's important to know that in the consideration here, that the table of contents of the bill and what is supposed to be the final version does not reflect what is the actual content that is on the site as the final version. And, a lot of times here, they will have a PDF, which is supposed to be the final form in its official manner, which I think is supposed to reflect the parchment that would then be approved and then sent to the president. There's this thing in Congress about whether or not the president, whether or not it is on parchment versus whether or not it is on paper. This is more than just a ceremonial manner. It has a certain kind of validity based upon whether or not it is considered parchment. But insofar as this is an electronic version that is supposed to be the official record, it cuts off more than a significant part in what is reflected as the final version of the bill, including the section I just read and this section, which is the one, which is another one, that section 1404. Annual study of relationship between public debt and activities of government-sponsored enterprises. Now, I'll read this. A, in general, in order to better manage the bonded indebtedness of the United States, the Secretary of the Treasury shall annually conduct a study to assess the financial safety and soundness of the activities of all government-sponsored enterprises and the impact of their operations on federal borrowing. B, access to relevant information. 1, information from GSEs. Each government-sponsored enterprise shall provide full and prompt access to the Secretary to its books and records and shall promptly provide any other information requested by the Secretary. 2, information from supervisory agencies. In conducting the study under this section, the Secretary may request information from or the assistance of any federal department or agency authorized by law to supervise the activities of any government-sponsored enterprise. C, assessment of risk. In assessing the financial safety and soundness of the activities of government-sponsored enterprises and the impact of their activities on federal borrowing, The Secretary shall quantify the risks associated with each government-sponsored enterprise. In quantifying such risks, the Secretary shall determine the volume and type of securities outstanding which are issued or guaranteed by each government-sponsored enterprise, the capitalization of each government-sponsored enterprise, and the degree of risk involved in the operations of each government-sponsored enterprise due to factors such as credit risk, interest rate risk, management and operations risk, and business risk. The Secretary shall also report on the quality and timelines of information currently available to the public and the federal government concerning the extent and nature of the activities of government-sponsored enterprises and the financial risk associated with such activities. There's other parts of this section. I contend that what really happened is a bunch of spoiled people, including mostly lawyers, in Congress allowed for government-sponsored enterprises to be set up on people and their capabilities. And rather than following the law, which would require a disclosure of how us and our intangible property, as well as options set up on any sort of financial contracts we may engage, like, I don't know, a federal student loan, I don't know, a private loan later acquired as part of a process of continuing financing for the original government-sponsored enterprise upon which the creditability of that specific loan was based, they would have had to have reported annually. And they would have had to report on all the risks associated. So if they had disclosed that you were part of a government-sponsored enterprise and you were trying to do something for your life, annually they would have been required to have reported on that enterprise and include your participation and any risks associated with your participation, as well as how your participation and the risk associated with that enterprise could impact your future prospects. This was passed into law in 1989. So far as I know, it hasn't been rescinded. But did they just try to take it out and then put it into something like healthcare so that they could alleviate or remove people's actual legal capacity to engage contracts for themselves and then replace their legal capacity to engage contracts for themselves with somebody under the auspices of representing their interests as either a lawyer or a doctor? That is not only illegal, it's human trafficking, and it completely discredits any of the institutions that allowed for people to actually participate as brokers of people's lives rather than as professionals that adhere to legally required reporting guidelines and legal professional standards.